Remember to check out my Patreon page for full audiobooks and loads more extra content. Remember, there's always time for another story. Chapter 45. Percy. Percy felt homesick for the swamp. He never thought he'd miss sleeping in a giant's leather bed, in a dragon bone hut, in a festering cesspool, but right now that sounded like Elysium. He and Annabeth and Bob stumbled along in the darkness, the air thick and cold, the ground alternating patches of pointy rocks and pools of muck. The terrain seemed to be designed so that Percy could never let his guard down. Even walking 10 feet was exhausting. Percy had started out from the giant's hut, feeling strong again, his head clear, his belly full of dragon jerky from their packs of provisions. Now his legs were sore, every muscle ached. He pulled a makeshift tunic of dragon leather over his shredded t-shirt, but it did nothing to keep out the chill. His focus narrowed to the ground in front of him. Nothing existed except for that and Annabeth at his side. Whenever he felt like giving up, plopping himself down and dying, which was like every 10 minutes, he reached over and took her hand, just to remember there was warmth in the world. After Annabeth's talk with Damison, Percy was worried about her. Annabeth didn't give in to despair easily, but as they walked she wiped tears from her eyes, trying not to let Percy see. He knew she hated it when her plans didn't work out. She was convinced they needed Damison's help, but the giant had turned them down. Part of Percy was relieved. He was concerned enough about Bob staying on their side once they reached the doors of death. He wasn't sure he wanted a giant as his wingman, even if that giant could cook a mean bowl of stew. He wondered what had happened after they left Damison's hut. He hadn't heard their pursuers in hours, but he could sense their hatred, especially Polypotus. That giant was back there somewhere, following, pushing them deeper into Tartarus. Percy tried to think of good things to keep his spirits up. The lakes at Camp Half-Blood, the time he'd kissed Annabeth underwater. He tried to imagine the two of them at New Rome together, walking through the hills and holding hands. But Camp Jupiter and Camp Half-Blood both seemed like dreams. He felt as if only Tartarus existed. This was the real world. Death, darkness, cold, pain. He'd been imagining all the rest. He shivered. No, that was the pit speaking to him, sapping his resolve. He wondered how Nico had survived down here alone, without going insane. That kid had more strength than Percy had given him credit for. The deeper they travelled, the harder it became to stay focused. "This place is worse than the river Cocytus," he muttered. "Yes," Bob called back happily. "Much worse. It means we are close." Close to what? Percy wondered, but he didn't have the strength to ask. He noticed small Bob the cat had hidden himself in Bob's coveralls again, which reinforced Percy's opinion that the kitten was the smartest one in their group. Annabeth laced her fingers through his. In the light of his bronze sword, her face was beautiful. "We're together," she reminded him. "We'll get through this." He'd been so worried about lifting her spirits, and here she was reassuring him. "Yeah," he agreed. "Piece of cake." "But next time," she said, "I want to go somewhere different on a date." Paris was nice, he recalled. She managed to smile. Months ago, before Percy's amnesia, they had dinner in Paris one night, compliments of Hermes. That seemed like another lifetime. "I'd settle for New Rome," she offered, "as long as you're there with me." Man, Annabeth was awesome. For a moment, Percy actually remembered what it was like to feel happy. He had an amazing girlfriend. They could have a future together. Then the darkness dispersed with a massive sigh, like the last breath of a dying god. In front of them was a clearing, a barren field of dust and stones. In the centre, about 20 yards away, knelt the gruesome figure of a woman, her clothes tattered, her limbs emaciated, her skin leathery green. Her head was bent as she sobbed quietly, and the sound shattered all Percy's hopes. He realised that life was pointless. His struggles were nothing. This woman cried as if mourning the death of the entire world. "We're here," Bob announced. "Achilles can help." Chapter 46. Percy. If the sobbing ghoul was Bob's idea of help, Percy was pretty sure he didn't want it. Nevertheless, Bob trudged forward. Percy felt obliged to follow. If nothing else, this area was less dark, not exactly light, but with more of a soupy white fog. "Achilles," Bob called. The creature raised her head, and Percy's stomach screamed. "Help me." Her body was bad enough. She looked like the victim of a famine, limbs like sticks, swollen knees and knobby elbows, rags for clothes, broken fingernails and toenails. Dust was caked on her skin and piled on her shoulders, as if she'd taken a shower at the bottom of an hourglass. Her face was utter desolation. Her eyes were sunken and rheumy, pouring out tears. Her nose dripped like a waterfall. Her stringy grey hair was matted to her skull in greasy tufts, and her cheeks were raked and bleeding, as if she'd been clawing herself. Percy couldn't stand to meet her eyes, so he lowered his gaze. Across her knees lay an ancient shield, a battered circle of wood and bronze, painted with the likeness of Aklis herself holding a shield, so the image seemed to go on forever, smaller and smaller. "That shield," Annabeth murmured. "That's his. I thought it was just a story." "Oh no," the old hag wailed. "The shield of Hercules. He painted me on its surface, so his enemies would see me in their final moments. The goddess of misery." She coughed so hard it made Percy's chest hurt. As if Hercules knew true misery. It's not even a good likeness. Percy gulped. When he and his friends had encountered Hercules at the Straits of Gibraltar, it hadn't gone well. The exchange had involved a lot of yelling, death threats, and high-velocity pineapples. "What's his shield doing here?" Percy asked. The goddess stared at him with her wet, milky eyes. Her cheeks dripped blood, making red polka dots on her tattered dress. "He doesn't need it anymore, does he? It came here when his mortal body was burned. A reminder, I suppose, that no shield is sufficient. In the end, misery overtakes all of you, even Hercules." Percy inched closer to Annabeth. He tried to remember why they were here, but the sense of despair made it difficult to think. Hearing Aklis speak, he no longer found it strange that she had clawed her own cheeks. The goddess radiated pure pain. "Bob," Percy said, "we shouldn't have come here." From somewhere inside Bob's uniform, the skeleton kitten mewed in agreement. The Titan shifted and winced as if small Bob was clawing his armpit. "Aklis controls the death mist," he insisted. "She can hide you." "Hide them?" Aklis made a gurgling sound. She was either laughing or choking to death. "Why would I do that?" "They must reach the doors of death," Bob said, "to return to the mortal world." "Impossible," Aklis said. "The armies of Tartarus will find you. They will kill you." Annabeth turned the blade of her dracon bone sword, which Percy had to admit made her look pretty intimidating and hot in a barbarian princess kind of way. "So, I guess your death mist is pretty useless then," she said. The goddess bared her broken yellow teeth. "Useless? Who are you?" "A daughter of Athena?" Annabeth's voice sounded brave, though how she did it Percy didn't know. "I didn't walk halfway across Tartarus to be told what's impossible but by some minor goddess." The dust quivered at their feet. Fog swirled around them with a sound like agonizing wailing. "Minor goddess." Aklis's gnarled fingernails dug into Hercules' shield, gouging the metal. "I was old before the Titans were born, you ignorant girl. I was old when Gaia first woke. Misery is eternal. Existence is misery. I was born of the eldest ones, of chaos and night. I was—" "Yes, yes," Annabeth said. "Sadness and misery, blah, blah, blah. But you still don't have enough power to hide two demigods with your death mist. Like I said, useless." Percy cleared his throat. Annabeth?" She flashed him a warning look. "Work with me." He realised how terrified she was, but she had no choice. This was their best shot at stirring the goddess into action. "I mean, Annabeth is right," Percy volunteered. "Bob brought us all this way because he thought you could help. But I guess you're too busy staring at that shield and crying. I can't blame you. It looks just like you." Aklis wailed and glared at the Titan. "Why did you inflict these annoying children on me?" Bob made a sound somewhere between a rumble and a whimper. I thought... "The death mist is not for helping," Aklis shrieked. "It shrouds mortals in misery as their souls pass into the underworld. It is the very breath of Tartarus, of death, of despair." "Awesome," Percy said. "Could we get 2 orders of that to go?" Aklis hissed. "Ask me for a more sensible gift. I am also the goddess of poisons. I could give you the death. Thousands of ways to die, less painful than the one you have chosen by marching into the heart of the pit." Around the goddess, flowers bloomed in the dust, dark purple, orange and red blossoms that smelled sickly sweet. Percy's head swam. "Nightshade," Aklis offered. "Hemlock, belladonna, henbane or strychnine. I can dissolve your innards, boil your blood." "That's very nice of you," Percy said, "but I've had enough poison for one trip. Now, can you hide us in your death mist or not?" "Yeah, it'll be fun," Annabeth said. The goddess's eyes narrowed. "Fun? Sure," Annabeth promised. "If we fail, think how great it will be for you, gloating over our spirits when we die in agony. You'll get to say, 'I told you so' for eternity." "Or, if we succeed," Percy added, "think of all the suffering you'll bring to the monsters down there. We intend to seal the doors of death. That's going to cause a lot of wailing and moaning." Aklis considered. "I enjoy suffering. Wailing is also good." "Then it's settled," Percy said. "Make us invisible." Aklis struggled to her feet. The shield of Hercules rolled away and wobbled to a stop in a patch of poisoned flowers. "It is not so simple," the goddess said. The death mist comes at the moment you are closest to your end. Your eyes will be clouded only then. The world will fade. Percy's mouth felt dry. Okay, but we'll be shrouded from the monsters? Oh, yes, Aklis said. If you survive the process, you will be able to pass unnoticed among the armies of Tartarus. It is hopeless, of course, but if you are determined, then come. I will show you the way. The way to where exactly? Annabeth asked. The goddess was already shuffling into the gloom. Percy turned to look at Bob, but the Titan was gone. How does a 10-foot-tall silver dude with a very loud kitten disappear? Hey, Percy yelled to Aklis. Where's our friend? He cannot take this path, the goddess called back. He is not mortal. Come, little fools, come, experience the death mist. Annabeth exhaled and grabbed his hand. Well, how bad can it be? The question was so ridiculous Percy laughed, even though it hurt his lungs. Yeah, next date though. Dinner in New Rome? They followed the goddess's dusty footprints through the poison flowers, deeper into the fog. Chapter 47. Percy. Percy missed Bob. He'd got used to having the Titan on his side, lighting their way with his silver hair and his fearsome war broom. Now, their only guide was an emaciated corpse lady with serious self-esteem issues. As they struggled across the dusty plain, the fog became so thick that Percy had to resist the urge to swat it away with his hands. The only reason he was able to follow Aklis's path was because poisonous plants sprang up whenever she walked. If they were still on the body of Tartarus, Percy figured they must be on the bottom of his foot, a rough, calloused expanse where only the most disgusting plant life grew. Finally, they arrived at the end of the big toe. At least that's what it looked like to Percy. The fog dissipated, and they found themselves on a peninsula that jutted out over a pitch-black void. Here we are. Aklis turned and leered at them. Blood from her cheeks dripped on her dress. Her sickly eyes looked moist and swollen, but somehow excited. Can misery look excited? Great, Percy asked. Where is here? The verge of final death, Aklis said, where night meets the void below Tartarus. Annabeth inched forward and peered over the cliff. I thought there was nothing below Tartarus. Oh, certainly there is, Aklis coughed. Even Tartarus had to rise from somewhere. This is the edge of the earliest darkness, which was my mother. Below lies the realm of chaos, my father. Here you are closer to nothingness than any mortal has ever been. Can you not feel it? Percy knew what she meant. The void seemed to be pulling at him, leaching the breath from his lungs and the oxygen from his blood. He looked at Annabeth and saw that her lips were tinged blue. We can't stay here, he said. No, indeed, Aklis said. Don't you feel the death mist? Even now you pass between. Look. White smoke gathered around Percy's feet. As it coiled up his legs, he realised the smoke wasn't surrounding him. It was coming from him. His whole body was dissolving. He held up his hands and found they were fuzzy and indistinct. He couldn't even tell how many fingers he had. Hopefully still 10. He turned to Annabeth and stifled a yelp. You're, He couldn't say it. She looked dead. Her skin was sallow, her eye sockets dark and sunken. Her beautiful hair had dried into a skin of cobwebs. She looked like she'd been stuck in a cool, dark mausoleum for decades, slowly withering into a desiccated husk. When she turned to look at him, her features momentarily blurred into mist. Percy's blood moved like sap in his veins. For years he had worried about Annabeth dying. When you're a demigod, that goes with the territory. Most half-bloods don't live long. You always knew that the next monster you fought could be your last. But seeing Annabeth like this was too painful. He'd rather stand in the river Phlegethon, or get attacked by Array, or be trampled by giants. Oh gods, Annabeth sobbed. Percy, the way you look. Percy studied his arms. All he saw were blobs of white mist, but he guessed that to Annabeth he looked like a corpse. He took a few steps. Though it was difficult, his body felt insubstantial, like he was made of helium and cotton candy. I've looked better, he decided. I can't move very well, but I'm all right. Aklis clucked. Oh, you're definitely not all right. Percy frowned. But we'll pass unseen now. Can we get to the doors of death? Well, perhaps you could, the goddess said, if you lived that long, which you won't. Aklis spread her gnarled fingers. Her plants, more plants, bloomed around the edge of the pit, hemlock, nightshade and oleander spreading towards Percy's feet like a deadly carpet. The death mist is not simply a disguise, you see. It is a state of being. I could not bring you this gift unless death followed. True death. It's a trap, Annabeth said. The goddess cackled. Didn't you expect me to betray you? Yes, Annabeth and Percy said together. Well then, it was hardly a trap, more of an inevitability. Misery is inevitable. Pain is... Yeah, Percy growled. Let's get to the fighting. He drew Riptide, but the blade was made of smoke. When he slashed at Aklis, the sword just floated across her like a gentle breeze. The goddess's ruined mouth split into a grin. Did I forget to mention? You are only mist now, a shadow before death. Perhaps, if you had time, you could learn to control your new form. But you do not have time. Since you cannot touch me, I fear any fight with misery will be quite one-sided. Her fingernails grew into talons, her jaw unhinged, and her yellow teeth elongated into fangs. Chapter 48. Percy. Aklis lunged at Percy, and for a split second he thought, well, hey, I'm just smoke. She can't touch me, right? He imagined the fates up in Olympus, laughing at his wishful thinking. Lol, noob. The goddess's claws raked across his chest and stung like boiling water. Percy stumbled backwards, but he wasn't used to being smoky. His legs moved too slowly. His arms felt like tissue paper. In desperation, he threw his backpack at her, thinking maybe it would turn solid when it left his hand. But no such luck. It fell with a soft thud. Aklis snarled, crouching to spring. She would have bitten Percy's face off if Annabeth hadn't charged and screamed, "Hey!" right in the goddess's ear. Aklis flinched, turning towards the sound. She lashed out at Annabeth, but Annabeth was better at moving than Percy. Maybe she wasn't feeling as smoky, or maybe she just had more combat training. She'd been at Camp Half-Blood since she was 7. Probably she'd had classes Percy never got, like how to fight while partially made of smoke. Annabeth dived straight between the goddess's legs and somersaulted to her feet. Aklis turned and attacked, but Annabeth dodged again like a matador. Percy was so stunned he lost a few precious seconds. He stared at corpse Annabeth, shrouded in mist, but moving as fast and confidently as ever. Then it occurred to him why she was doing this. To buy them time, which meant Percy needed to help. He fought furiously, trying to come up with a way to defeat misery. How could he fight when he couldn't touch anything? On Aklis's third attack, Annabeth wasn't so lucky. She tried to veer aside, but the goddess grabbed Annabeth's wrist and pulled her hard, sending her sprawling. Before the goddess could pounce, Percy advanced, yelling and waving his sword. He still felt about as solid as a Kleenex, but his anger seemed to help him move faster. "Hey, happy!" he yelled. Aklis spun, dropping Annabeth's arm. "Happy?" she demanded. "Yeah." He ducked as she swiped at his head. "You're downright cheerful." "Ah!" She lunged again, but she was off balance. Percy sidestepped and backed away, leading the goddess further from Annabeth. "Pleasant," he called. "Delightful." The goddess snarled and winced. She stumbled after Percy. Each compliment seemed to hit her like sand in the face. "I will kill you slowly," she growled, her eyes and nose watering, blood dripping from her cheeks. "I will cut you into pieces as a sacrifice tonight." Annabeth struggled to her feet. She started rifling through her pack, no doubt looking for something that might help. Percy wanted to give her more time. She was the brains. Better for him to get attacked while she came up with a brilliant plan. "Cuddly," Percy yelled. "Fuzzy, warm and huggable." Aklis made a growling, choking noise, like a cat having a seizure. "A slow death," she screamed. "A death from 1,000 poisons." All around her, poisonous plants grew and burst like overfilled balloons. Green and white sap trickled out, collecting into pools, and began flowing across the ground towards Percy. The sweet-smelling fumes made his head feel wobbly. "Percy!" Annabeth's voice sounded far away. Hey, Miss Wonderful, Cheerful, Grins, over here." But the goddess of misery was now fixated on Percy. He tried to retreat again. Unfortunately, the poison ichor was flowing all around him now, making the ground steam and the air burn. Percy found himself stuck on an island of dust not much bigger than a shield. A few yards away, his backpack smoked and dissolved into a puddle of goo. Percy had nowhere to go. He fell to one knee. He wanted to tell Annabeth to run, but he couldn't speak. His throat was as dry as dead leaves. He wished there was water in Tartarus, some nice pool he could jump into to heal himself, or maybe a river he could control. He'd settle for a bottle of Evian. "You will feed the eternal darkness," Aklis said. "You will die in the arms of night." He was dimly aware of Annabeth shouting, throwing random pieces of Dracon jerky at the goddess. The white-green poison kept pooling, little streams trickling from the plants as the venomous lake around him got wider and wider. Lake, he thought. Streams. Water. Probably it was just his brain getting fried from poison fumes, but he croaked out a laugh. Poison was liquid. If it moved like water, it must be partially water. He remembered some science lecture about the human body being mostly water. He remembered extracting water from Jason's lungs back in Rome. If he could control that, then why not other liquids? It was a crazy idea. Poseidon was the god of the sea, not of every liquid everywhere. Then again, Tartarus had its own rules. Fire was drinkable. The ground was the body of a dark god. The air was acid, and demigods could be turned into smoky corpses. So why not try? He had nothing left to lose. He glared at the poison flood, encroaching from all sides. He concentrated so hard that something inside him cracked, as if a crystal ball had shattered in his stomach. Warmth flowed through him. The poison tide stopped. The fumes blew away from him, back towards the goddess. The lake of poison rolled towards her in tiny waves and rivulets. Aklis shrieked, "What is this?" "Poison," Percy said. "That's your speciality, right?" He stood, his anger growing hotter in his gut. As the flood of venom rolled towards the goddess, the fumes began to make her cough. Her eyes watered even more. Oh, good, Percy thought. More water. Percy imagined her nose and throat filling with her own tears. Aklis gagged. The tide of venom reached her feet, sizzling like droplets on a hot iron. She wailed and stumbled back. "Percy!" Annabeth called. She'd retreated to the edge of the cliff, even though the poison wasn't after her. She sounded terrified. It took Percy a moment to realise she was terrified of him. "Stop," she pleaded, her voice hoarse. He didn't want to stop. He wanted to choke this goddess. He wanted to watch her drown in her own poison. He wanted to see just how much misery could take. "Percy, please." Annabeth's face was still pale and corpse-like, but her eyes were the same as always. The anguish in them made Percy's anger fade. He turned to the goddess. He willed the poison to recede, creating a small path of retreat along the edge of the cliff. "Leave," he bellowed. For an emaciated ghoul, Aklis could run pretty fast when she wanted to. She scrambled along the path, fell on her face and got up again, wailing as she sped into the dark. As soon as she was gone, the pools of poison evaporated. The plants withered to dust and blew away. Annabeth stumbled towards him. She looked like a corpse wreathed in smoke, but she felt solid enough when she gripped his arms. "Percy, please don't ever..." Her voice broke in a sob. "Some things aren't meant to be controlled. Please." His whole body tinged and tingled with power, but the anger was subsiding. The broken glass inside him was beginning to smooth at the edges. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, okay." "We have to get away from this cliff," Annabeth said. "If Aklis brought us here as some kind of sacrifice." Percy tried to think. He was getting used to moving with the death mist around him. He felt more solid, more like himself, but his mind still felt stuffed with cotton wool. "She said something about feeding us to the night," he remembered. What was that about? The temperature dropped. The abyss before them seemed to exhale. Percy grabbed Annabeth and backed away from the edge as a presence emerged from the void. A form so vast and shadowy, he felt like he understood the concept of dark for the first time. "I imagine," said the darkness, in a feminine voice as soft as coffin lining, that she meant night with a capital N. "After all, I am the only one." Chapter 49. Leo. The way Leo figured it, he spent more time crashing than he did flying. If there was a rewards card for frequent crashes, he'd be like double platinum level. He regained consciousness as he was free-falling through the clouds. He had a hazy memory of Keone taunting him right before he got shot into the sky. He hadn't actually seen her, but he could never forget that snow witch's voice. He had no idea how long he'd been gaining altitude, but at some point he must have passed out from the cold and the lack of oxygen. Now he was on his way down, heading for his biggest crash ever. The clouds parted around him. He saw the glittering sea far, far below. No sign of the Argo 2. No sign of any coastline, familiar or otherwise, except for one tiny island at the horizon. Leo couldn't fly. He had a couple of minutes, at most, before he'd hit the water and go kersplat. He decided he didn't like that ending to the epic ballad of Leo. He was still clutching the Archimedes sphere, which didn't surprise him. Unconscious or not, he would never let go of his most valuable possession. With a little manoeuvring, he managed to pull some duct tape from his tool belt and strap the sphere to his chest. That made him look like a low-budget Iron Man, but at least he had both hands free. He started to work, furiously tinkering with the sphere, pulling out anything he thought would help from his magic tool belt. A drop cloth, metal extenders, some string and grommets. Working while falling was almost impossible. The wind roared in his ears. It kept ripping tools, screws and canvas out of his hands, but finally he constructed a makeshift frame. He popped open a hatch on the sphere, teased out 2 wires and connected them to his crossbar. How long until he hit the water? Maybe a minute? He turned the sphere's control dial, and it whirred into action. More bronze wires shot from the orb, intuitively sensing what Leo needed. Cords laced up the canvas drop cloth. The frame began to expand on its own. Leo pulled out a can of kerosene and a rubber tube and lashed them to the thirsty new engine that the orb was helping him assemble. Finally, he made himself a rope halter and shifted so that the X-frame was attached to his back. The sea got closer and closer, a glittering expanse of slap-you-in-the-face death. He yelled in defiance and punched the sphere's override switch. The engine coughed to life. The makeshift rotor turned. The canvas blade spun, but much too slowly. Leo's head was pointed straight down to the sea, maybe 30 seconds to impact. At least nobody's around, he thought bitterly, or I'd be a demigod joke forever. What was the last thing to go through Leo's mind? The Mediterranean. Suddenly the orb got warm against his chest. The blades turned faster. The engine coughed, and Leo tilted sideways, slicing through the air. Yes, he yelled. He had successfully created the world's most dangerous personal helicopter. He shot towards the island in the distance, but he was still falling much too fast. The blade shuddered. The canvas screamed. The beach was only a few hundred yards away when the sphere turned lava hot and the helicopter exploded, shooting flames in every direction. If he hadn't been immune to fire, Leo would have been charcoal. As it was, the mid-air explosion probably saved his life. The blast flung Leo sideways, while the bulk of the flaming contraption smashed into the shore at full speed, with a massive kaboom. Leo opened his eyes, amazed to be alive. He was sitting in a bathtub-sized crater in the sand. A few yards away, a column of thick black smoke roiled into the sky from a much larger crater. The surrounding beach was peppered with smaller pieces of burning wreckage. My sphere. Leo patted his chest. The sphere wasn't there. His duct tape and rope halter had disintegrated. He struggled to his feet. None of his bones seemed broken, which was good, but mostly he was worried about his Archimedes sphere. If he destroyed his priceless artifact to make a flaming 30-second helicopter, he was going to track down that stupid snow goddess Chione and smack her with a monkey wrench. He staggered across the beach, wondering why there weren't any tourists or hotels or boats in sight. The island seemed perfect for a resort, with blue water and soft white sand. Maybe it was uncharted. Did they still have uncharted islands in the world? Maybe Chione had blasted him out of the Mediterranean altogether. For all he knew, he was in Bora Bora. The larger crater was about 8 feet deep. At the bottom, the helicopter blades were still trying to turn. The engine belched smoke. The rotor croaked like a stepped-on frog. But dang, pretty impressive for a rush job. The helicopter had apparently crashed onto something. The crater was littered with broken wooden furniture, shattered china plates, some half-melted pewter goblets, and burning linen napkins. Leo wasn't sure why all that fancy stuff had been on the beach, but at least it meant that this place was inhabited, after all. Finally, he spotted the Archimedes sphere, steaming and charred but still intact, making unhappy clicking noises in the centre of the wreckage. "Sphere," he yelled, "come to Papa." He skidded to the bottom of the crater and snatched up the sphere. He collapsed, sat cross-legged, and cradled the device in his hands. The bronze surface was searing hot, but Leo didn't care. It was still in one piece, which meant he could use it. Now, if he could just figure out where he was and how to get back to his friends. He was making a mental list of tools he might need when a girl's voice interrupted him. "What are you doing? You blew up my dining table." Immediately, Leo thought, uh-oh. He'd met a lot of goddesses, but the girl glaring down at him from the edge of the crater actually looked like a goddess. She wore a sleeveless white Greek-style dress with a gold-braided belt. Her hair was long, straight, and golden brown. Almost the same cinnamon toast colour as Hazel's, but the similarity to Hazel ended there. The girl's face was milky pale, with dark almond-shaped eyes and pouty lips. She looked maybe 15, about Leo's age, and sure, she was pretty, but with that angry expression on her face, she reminded Leo of every popular girl in every school he'd ever attended. The ones who made fun of him, gossiped a lot, thought they were so superior, and basically did everything they could to make his life miserable. Leo disliked her instantly. "Oh, I'm sorry," he said. "I just fell out of the sky. I constructed a helicopter in mid-air, burst into flames halfway down, crash-landed and barely survived. But by all means, let's talk about your dining table." He snatched up a half-melted goblet. "Who puts a dining table on the beach where innocent demigods can crash into it? Who does that?" The girl clenched her fists. Leo was pretty sure she was going to march down the crater and punch him in the face. Instead, she looked up at the sky. "Really?" She screamed at the empty blue. "You want to make my curse even worse? Zeus, Hephaestus, Hermes, have you no shame?" Leo noticed that she just picked 3 gods to blame, and one of them was his dad. He figured that wasn't a good sign. I doubt they're listening. You know, the whole split personality thing. "Show yourself," the girl yelled at the sky, completely ignoring Leo. It's not bad enough I am exiled. It's not bad enough you take away the few good heroes I'm allowed to meet. You think it's funny to send me this charbroiled runt of a boy to ruin my tranquility? This is not funny. Take him back. Hey, Sunshine, Leo said. I'm right here, you know. She growled like a cornered animal. Do not call me Sunshine. Get out of that hole and come with me now so I can get you off my island. Well, since you ask so nicely. Leo didn't know what the crazy girl was so worked up about, and he really didn't care. If she could help him leave this island, that was totally fine by him. He clutched his charred sphere and climbed out of the crater. When he reached the top, the girl was already marching down the shoreline. He jogged to catch up. She gestured in disgust at the burning wreckage. This was a pristine beach. Look at it now. Yeah, my bad, Leo muttered. I should have crashed on one of the other islands. Oh, wait, there aren't any. She snarled and kept walking along the edge of the water. Leo caught a whiff of cinnamon. Maybe her perfume? Not that he cared. Her hair swayed down her back in a mesmerising kind of way, which, of course, he didn't care about either. He scanned the sea. Just like he'd seen during his fall, there was no land masses or ships all the way to the horizon. Looking inland, he saw grassy hills dotted with trees. A footpath wound through a grove of cedars. Leo wondered where it led. Probably to the girl's secret lair, where she roasted her enemies, so she could eat them at her dining table on the beach. He was so busy thinking about that he didn't notice when the girl stopped. He ran into her. Ah! She turned and grabbed his arms to keep from falling in the surf. Her hands were strong, as though she worked with them for a living. Back at camp, the girls in the Hephaestus cabin had strong hands like that too, but she didn't look like a Hephaestus kid. She glared at him, her dark almond eyes only a few inches from his. Her cinnamon smell reminded him of his Abula's apartment. Man, he hadn't thought about that place in years. The girl pushed him away. All right, this spot is good. Now, tell me you want to leave. What? Leo's brain was still kind of muddled from the crash landing. He wasn't sure he had heard her right. Do you want to leave? She demanded. Surely you've got somewhere to go. Yeah, my friends are in trouble. I need to get back to my ship and, Fine, she snapped. Just say, I want to leave Argia. Okay. Leo wasn't sure why, but her tone kind of hurt, which was stupid, since he didn't care what this girl thought. I want to leave, whatever you said? Oh, Gia. The girl pronounced it slowly, as if Leo was 5 years old. I want to leave, Gia, he said. She exhaled, clearly relieved. Good. In a moment, a magical raft will appear. It will take you wherever you want to go. Who are you? She looked like she was about to answer, but stopped herself. It doesn't matter. You'll be gone soon. You're obviously a mistake. That was harsh, Leo thought. He'd spent enough time thinking he was a mistake. As a demigod, on this quest, in life in general, he didn't need a random crazy goddess reinforcing the idea. He remembered a Greek legend about a girl on an island. Maybe one of his friends had mentioned it. It didn't matter, as long as she let him leave. Any moment now, the girl stared out at the water. No magical raft appeared. Maybe it got stuck in traffic, Leo said. This is wrong. She glared at the sky. This is completely wrong. So, plan B? Leo asked. You got a phone or... The girl turned and stormed inland. When she got to the footpath, she sprinted into the grove of trees and disappeared. Okay, Leo said. Or you could just run away. From his tool belt pouches he pulled some rope and snap hook, then fastened the Archimedes sphere to his belt. He looked out to sea. Still no magic raft. He could stand here and wait, but he was hungry, thirsty and tired. He was banged up pretty bad from his fall. He didn't want to follow that crazy girl, no matter how good she smelled. On the other hand, he had no place else to go. The girl had a dining table, so she probably had food, and she seemed to find Leo's presence annoying. Annoying her is a plus, he decided. He followed her into the hills. Chapter 50. Leo. Holy Hephaestus, Leo said. The path opened into the nicest garden Leo had ever seen. Not that he had spent a lot of time in gardens, but dang! On the left was an orchard and a vineyard, peach trees with red golden fruit that smelled awesome in the warm sun, carefully pruned vines bursting with grapes, bowers of flowering jasmine and a bunch of other plants Leo couldn't name. On the right were neat beds of vegetables and herbs arranged like spokes around a big sparkling fountain where bronze satyrs spewed water into a central bowl. At the back of the garden where the footpath ended, a cave opened in the side of a grassy hill. Compared to Bunker 9 back at camp, the entrance was tiny, but it was impressive in its own way. On either side, crystalline rocks had been carved into glittering Grecian columns. The tops were fitted with bronze rods that held silky white curtains. Leo's nose was assaulted by good smells: cedar, juniper, jasmine, peaches and fresh herbs. The aroma from the cave really caught his attention, like beef stew cooking. He started towards the entrance. Seriously, how could he not? He stopped when he noticed the girl. She was kneeling in her vegetable garden, her back to Leo. She muttered to herself as she dug furiously with a trowel. Leo approached her from one side so she could see him. He didn't feel like surprising her when she was armed with a sharp gardening implement. She kept cursing in ancient Greek and stabbing at the dirt. She had flecks of soil all over her arms, her face and her white dress, but she didn't seem to care. Leo could appreciate that. She looked better with a little mud, less like a beauty queen and more like an actual get-your-hands-dirty kind of person. "I think you've punished the dirt enough," he offered. She scowled at him, her eyes red and watery. "Just go away." "You're crying," he said, which was stupidly obvious. But seeing her that way took the wind out of his helicopter blades, so to speak. It was hard to stay mad at someone who was crying. "None of your business," she muttered. "It's a big island. Just find your own place. Leave me alone." She waved vaguely towards the south. "Go that way, maybe." "So, no magic raft," Leo said. "No other way off the island?" "Apparently not." "What am I supposed to do then? Sit in the sand dunes until I die?" "That would be fine." The girl threw down her trowel and cursed at the sky. "Except I suppose he can't die here, can he, Zeus? This is not funny." "Can't die here?" Hold up. Leo's head spun like a crankshaft. He couldn't quite translate what this girl was saying, like when he heard Spaniards or South Americans speaking Spanish. Yeah, he could understand it, sort of, but it sounded so different that it was almost another language. "I'm going to need some more information here," he said. "You don't want me in your face, that's cool. I don't want to be here either. But I'm not going to die and in a corner. I have to get off this island. There's got to be a way. Every problem has a fix." She laughed bitterly. "You haven't lived very long, if you still believe that." The way she said it sent a shiver up his back. She looked the same age as him, but he wondered how old she really was. "You'd said something about a curse," he prompted. She flexed her fingers, like she was practicing her throat-strangling technique. "Yes, I cannot leave Aegea. My father, Atlas, fought against the gods and I supported him." "Atlas," Leo said. "As in the Titan Atlas." The girl rolled her eyes. "Yes, you impossible little—" Whatever she was going to say, she bit it back. "I was imprisoned here, where I could cause the Olympians no trouble. About a year ago, after the Second Titan War, the gods vowed to forgive their enemies and offer amnesty. Supposedly Percy made them promise." "Percy," Leo said. "Percy Jackson." She squeezed her eyes shut. A tear trickled down her cheek. "Oh," Leo thought. "Percy came here," he said. She dug her fingers into the soil. I thought I would be released. I dared to hope, but I am still here." Leo remembered now. The story was supposed to be a secret, but of course that meant it had spread like wildfire across the camp. Percy had told Annabeth. Months later, when Percy had gone missing, Annabeth told Piper. Piper told Jason. Percy had talked about visiting the island. He had met a goddess who developed a major crush on him and wanted him to stay, but eventually she let him go. "You're that lady," Leo said, "the one who was named after Caribbean music." Her eyes glinted murderously. "Caribbean music?" "Yeah, reggae." Leo shook his head. "Merengue. Hold on, I'll get it." He snapped his fingers. "Calypso. But Percy said you were awesome. He said you were all sweet and helpful, not, She shot to her feet. "Yes?" Nothing," Leo said. "Would you be sweet," she demanded, "if the gods forgot their promise to let you go? Would you be sweet if they laughed at you by sending another hero, but a hero who looked like you?" "Is that a trick question?" "Dia mortalis." She turned and marched into her cave. "Hey!" Leo ran after her. When he got inside, he lost his train of thought. The walls were made of multicoloured chunks of crystal. White curtains divided the cave into different rooms, with comfy pillows and woven rugs and platters of fresh fruit. He spotted a harp in one corner, a loom in another, and a big cooking pot where the stew was bubbling, filling the cavern with luscious smells. The strangest thing? The chores were doing themselves. Towels floated through the air, folding and stacking into neat piles. Spoons washed themselves in a copper sink. The scene reminded Leo of the invisible wind spirits that had served him lunch at Camp Jupiter. Calypso stood at a wash basin, cleaning the dirt off her arms. She scowled at Leo, but she didn't yell at him to leave. She seemed to be running out of energy for her anger. Leo cleared his throat. If he was going to get any help from this lady, he needed to be nice. "So, I get why you're angry. You probably never want to see another demigod again. I guess that didn't sit right when Percy left you." He was only the latest, she growled. Before him it was the pirate Drake, and before him Odysseus. They were all the same. The gods send me the greatest heroes, the ones I cannot help, but... You fall in love with them, Leo guessed, and then they leave you. Her chin trembled. This is my curse. I'd hoped to be free of it by now, but here I am, still stuck on Aegea after 3,000 years. 3,000? Leo's mouth felt tingly, like he'd just eaten Pop Rocks. You look good for 3,000. And now, the worst insult of all. The gods mock me by sending you. Anger bubbled in Leo's stomach. Yeah, typical. If Jason were here, Calypso would fall all over him. She'd beg him to stay, but he'd be all noble about returning to his duties, and he'd leave Calypso broken-hearted. That magic raft would totally arrive for him. But Leo, he was the annoying guest she couldn't get rid of. She'd never fall for him, because she was totally out of his league. Not that he cared. She wasn't his type anyway. She was way too annoying and beautiful, and, well, it didn't matter. Fine, he said. I'll leave you alone. I'll build something myself and get off this stupid island without your help. She shook her head sadly. You don't understand, do you? The gods are laughing at both of us. If the raft will not reappear, that means they've closed Aegea. You're stuck here the same as me. You can never leave. Chapter 51. Leo. The first few days were the worst. Leo slept outside on a bed of drop cloths under the stars. It got cold at night, even on the beach in the summer, so he built fires with the remains of Calypso's dining table. That cheered him up a little. During the days he walked the circumference of the island and found nothing of interest, unless you liked beaches and endless sea in every direction. He tried to send an iris message in the rainbows that formed in the sea spray, but he had no luck. He didn't have any drachmas for an offering, and apparently the goddess Iris wasn't interested in nuts and bolts. He didn't even dream, which was unusual for him, or for any demigod, so he had no idea what was going on in the outside world. Had his friends got rid of Chione? Were they looking for him, or had they sailed on to Epirus to complete their quest? He wasn't even sure what to hope for. The dream he'd had back on the Argo 2 finally made sense to him, when the evil sorceress lady had told him to either jump off a cliff into the clouds or descend into a dark tunnel where ghostly voices whispered. That tunnel must have represented the house of Hades, which Leo would never see now. He'd taken the cliff instead, falling through the sky to this stupid island. But in the dream, Leo had been given a choice. In real life, he'd had none. Chione had simply plucked him off his ship and shot him into orbit. Totally unfair. The worst part of being stuck here, he was losing track of the days. He woke up one morning and couldn't remember if he'd been on Aegea for 3 nights or 4. Calypso wasn't much help. Leo confronted her in the garden, but she just shook her head. Time is difficult here. Great. For all Leo knew, a century had passed in the real world and the war with Gaia was over for better or worse. Or maybe he'd only been on Aegea for 5 minutes. His whole life might pass here in the time it took his friends on the Argo 2 to have breakfast. Either way, he needed to get off this island. Calypso took pity on him in some ways. She sent her invisible servants to leave bowls of stew and goblets of lemonade at the edge of the garden. She even sent him a few new sets of clothes, simply undyed cotton trousers and shirts that she must have made on her loom. They fitted him so well, Leo wondered how she got his measurements. Maybe she just used her generic pattern for scrawny male. Anyway, he was glad to have new threads, since his old ones were pretty smelly and burnt. Usually Leo could keep his clothes from burning when he caught fire, but it took concentration. Sometimes back at camp, if he wasn't thinking about it, he'd be working on some metal project at the hot forge, look down and realise his clothes had burned away, except for his magic tool belt and a smoking pair of underpants. Kind of embarrassing. Despite the gifts, Calypso obviously didn't want to see him. One time he poked his head inside the cave and she freaked out, yelling and throwing pots at his head. Yeah, she was definitely on Team Leo. He ended up pitching a more permanent camp near the footpath, where the beach met the hills. That way he was close enough to pick up his meals. But Calypso didn't have to see him and go into the pot-throwing rage. He made himself a lean-to with sticks and canvas. He dug a campfire pit. He even managed to build himself a bench and a work table from some driftwood and a dead cedar branch. He spent hours fixing the Archimedes sphere, cleaning it and repairing its circuits. He made himself a compass, but the needle would spin all crazy no matter what he tried. Leo guessed a GPS would have been useless too. This island was designed to be off the charts, impossible to leave. He remembered the old bronze astrolabe he picked up in Bologna, the one the dwarfs told him Odysseus had made. He had a sneaking suspicion Odysseus had been thinking about this island when he constructed it, but unfortunately Leo had left it back on the ship with Buford the Wonder Table. Besides, the dwarfs had told him the astrolabe didn't work. Something about a missing crystal. He walked the beach, wondering why Keone had sent him here, assuming his landing here wasn't an accident. Why not just kill him instead? Maybe Keone wanted him to be in limbo forever. Perhaps she knew the gods were too incapacitated to pay attention to Aegea, and so the island's magic was broken. That could be why Calypso was still stuck here, and why the magic raft wouldn't appear for Leo. Or maybe the magic of this place was working just fine. The gods had punished Calypso by sending her buff, courageous dudes who left as soon as she fell for them. Maybe that was the problem. Calypso would never fall for Leo. She wanted him to leave, so they were stuck in a vicious circle. If that was Keone's plan, wow, major league devious. Then, one morning, he made a discovery, and things got even more complicated. Leo was walking in the hills, following a little brook that ran between two big cedar trees. He liked this area. It was the only place on Aegea where he couldn't see the sea, so he could pretend he wasn't stuck on an island. In the shade of the trees, he almost felt like he was back at Camp Half-Blood, heading through the woods towards Bunker 9. He jumped over the creek. Instead of landing on soft earth, his feet hit something much harder. Clang! Metal. Excited, Leo dug through the mulch until he saw the glint of bronze. Oh man! He giggled like a crazy person as he excavated the scraps. He had no idea why the stuff was here. Hephaestus was always tossing broken parts out of his godly workshop and littering the earth with scrap metal. But what were the chances some of it would hit Aegea? Leo found a handful of wires, a few bent gears, a piston that might still work, and several hammered sheets of celestial bronze. The smallest the size of a drink coaster, the largest the size of a war shield. It wasn't a lot, not compared to Bunker 9 or even to his supplies aboard the Argo 2, but it was more than sand and rocks. He looked up at the sunlight winking through the cedar branches. Dad, if you sent this here for me, thanks. If you didn't, well, thanks anyway. He gathered up his treasure trove and lugged it back to his campsite. After that, the days passed more quickly and with a lot more noise. First, Leo made himself a forge out of mud bricks, each one baked with his own fiery hands. He found a large rock he could use as an anvil base, and he pulled nails from his tool belt until he had enough to melt into a plate for a hammering surface. Once that was done, he began to recast the celestial bronze scraps. Each day his hammer rang on bronze until his rock anvil broke, or his tongs bent, or he ran out of firewood. Each evening he collapsed, drenched in sweat and covered in soot. But he felt great. At least he was working, trying to solve his problem. The first time Calypso came to check on him, it was to complain about the noise. Smoke and fire, she said, clanging on metal all day long. You're scaring away the birds. Oh no, not the birds, Leo grumbled. What do you hope to accomplish? He glanced up and almost smashed his thumb with his hammer. He'd been staring at metal and fire so long, he'd forgotten how beautiful Calypso was. Annoyingly beautiful. She stood there with the sunlight in her hair, her white skirt fluttering around her legs, a basket of grapes and fresh-baked bread tucked under one arm. Leo tried to ignore his rumbling stomach. I'm hoping to get off this island, he said. That is what you want, right? Calypso scowled. She set the basket near his bedroll. You haven't eaten in 2 days. Take a break and eat. 2 days. Leo hadn't even noticed, which surprised him since he liked food. He was even more surprised that Calypso had noticed. Thanks, he muttered. I'll try to hammer more quietly. Huh. She sounded unimpressed. After that, she didn't complain about the noise or the smoke. The next time she visited, Leo was putting the final touches to his first project. He didn't see her approach until she spoke right behind him. I brought you... Leo jumped, dropping his wires. Bronze bulls, girl. Don't sneak up on me like that. She was wearing red today, Leo's favourite colour. That was completely irrelevant. She looked really good in red. Also irrelevant. I wasn't sneaking, she said. I was bringing you these. She showed him the clothes that were folded over her arm, a new pair of jeans, a white t-shirt, an army fatigue jacket. Wait, those were his clothes, except that they couldn't be. His original army jacket had burned up months ago. He hadn't been wearing it when he landed on Aegea. But the clothes Calypso had looked exactly like the clothes he'd been wearing the first day he'd arrived at Camp Half-Blood. Except these looked bigger, resized to fit him better. How? He asked. Calypso set the clothes at his feet and backed away as if he were a dangerous beast. I do have a little magic, you know. You kept burning through the clothes I give you, so I thought I would weave something less flammable. Those won't burn. He picked up the jeans, but they felt just like normal denim. They are completely fireproof, Calypso promised. They'll stay clean and expand to fit you, should you ever become less scrawny. Thanks. He meant it so to sound sarcastic, but he was honestly impressed. Leo could make a lot of things, but an inflammable, self-cleaning outfit wasn't one of them. So You made an exact replica of my favourite outfit. Did you, like, Google me or something? She frowned. I don't know that word. You looked me up, he said, almost like you had some interest in me. She wrinkled her nose. I have an interest in not making you a new set of clothes every other day. I have an interest in you not smelling so bad and walking around my island in smouldering rags. Oh, yeah, Leo grinned. You're really warming up to me. Her face got even redder. You are the most insufferable person I have ever met. I was only returning a favour. You fixed my fountain. That, Leo laughed. The problem had been so simple he'd almost forgotten about it. One of the bronze satyrs had been turning sideways and the water pressure was off, so it started making an annoying ticking sound, jiggling up and down and spewing water over the rim of the pool. He'd pulled out a couple of tools and fixed it in about 2 minutes. That was no big deal. I don't like it when things don't work right. And the curtains across the cave entrance. The rod wasn't level. And my gardening tools. Look, I just sharpened the shears. Cutting vines with a dull blade is dangerous, and the pruners needed to be oiled at the hinge and... Oh, yeah, Calypso said in a pretty good imitation of his voice. You're really warming up to me. For once, Leo was speechless. Calypso's eyes glittered. He knew she was making fun of him, but somehow it didn't feel mean. She pointed at his work table. What are you building? Oh, he looked at the bronze mirror, which he'd just finished wiring up to the Archimedes sphere. In the screen's polished surface, his own reflection surprised him. His hair had grown out longer and curlier. His face was thinner and more chiselled, maybe because he hadn't been eating. His eyes were dark and a little ferocious when he wasn't smiling. Kind of a Tarzan look, if Tarzan came in extra small Latino. He couldn't blame Calypso for backing away from him. It's a seeing device, he said. We found one like this in Rome, in the workshop of Archimedes. If I can make it work, maybe I can find out what's going on with my friends. Calypso shook her head. That's impossible. This island is hidden, cut off from the world by strong magic. Time doesn't even flow the same here. Well, you've got to have some kind of outside contact. How did you find out that I used to wear my army jacket? She twisted her hair as if the question made her uncomfortable. Seeing the past is simple magic. Seeing the present or the future, that is not. Yeah, well, Leo said, watch and learn, sunshine. I just connect these last 2 wires and... The bronze plate sparked. Smoke billowed from the sphere. A flash fire raced up Leo's sleeve. He pulled off his shirt, threw it down and stomped on it. He could tell Calypso was trying not to laugh, but she was shaking with the effort. Not a word, Leo warned. She glanced at his bare chest, which was sweaty, bony and streaked with old scars from weapon-making accidents. Nothing worth commenting on, she assured him. If you want that device to work, perhaps you should try a musical invocation. Right, he said. Whenever an engine malfunctions, I like a tap dance around it. Works every time. She took a deep breath and began to sing. Her voice hit him like a cool breeze. Like that first cold front in Texas, when the summer heat finally breaks, and you start to believe things might get better. Leo couldn't understand the words, but the song was plaintive and bittersweet, as if she were describing a home she could never return to. Her singing was magic, no doubt, but it wasn't like Medea's trance-inducing voice, or even Piper's charm speak. The music didn't want anything from him. It simply reminded him of his best memories, building things with his mum in her workshop, sitting in the sunshine with his friends at camp. It made him miss home. Calypso stopped singing. Leo realised he was staring like an idiot. Any luck? She asked. He forced his eyes back to the bronze mirror. Nothing. Wait! The screen glowed. In the air above it, holographic pictures shimmered to life. Leo recognised the commons at Camp Half-Blood. There was no sound, but Clarice LaRue from the Ares cabin was yelling orders at the campers, forming them into lines. Leo's brethren from Cabin 9 hurried around, fitting everyone with armour and passing out weapons. Even Chiron, the centaur, was dressed for war. He trotted up and down the ranks, his plumed helmet gleaming, his legs decked in bronze greaves. His usual friendly smile was gone, replaced with a look of grim determination. In the distance, Greek triremes floated on Long Island Sound, prepped for war. Along the hills, catapults were being primed, satyrs patrolled the fields, and riders on Pegasi circled overhead, alert for aerial attacks. Your friends? Calypso asked. Leo nodded. His face felt numb. They're preparing for war. Against whom? Look, Leo said. The scene changed. A phalanx of Roman demigods marched through a moonlit vineyard. An illuminated sign in the distance read, Goldsmith Winery. I've seen that sign before, Leo said. That's not far from Camp Half-Blood. Suddenly the Roman ranks deteriorated into chaos. Demigods scattered, shields fell, javelins swung wildly, like the whole group had stepped in fire ants. Darting through the moonlight were two small hairy shapes, dressed in mismatched clothes and garish hats. They seemed to be everywhere at once, whacking Romans on the head, stealing their weapons, cutting their belts so that their trousers fell around their ankles. Leo couldn't help grinning. Those beautiful little troublemakers. They kept their promise. Calypso leaned in, watching the Cacopus. Cousins of yours? No, Leo said. Couple of dwarfs I met in Bologna. I sent them to slow down the Romans, and they're doing it. But for how long? Calypso wondered. Good question. The scene shifted again. Leo saw Octavian, that no-good blonde scarecrow of an augur. He stood in a gas station parking lot, surrounded by black SUVs and Roman demigods. He held up a long pole wrapped in canvas. When he uncovered it, a golden eagle glimmered at the top. Oh, that's not good, Leo said. A Roman standard, Calypso noted. Yeah, and this one shoots lightning, according to Percy. As soon as he said Percy's name, Leo regretted it. He glanced at Calypso. He could see in her eyes how much she was struggling, trying to marshal her emotions into neat, orderly rows, like strands on her loom. What surprised Leo most was the surge of anger he felt. It wasn't just annoyance or jealousy. He was mad at Percy for hurting the girl. He refocused on the holographic images. Now he saw a single rider, Raina, the praetor from Camp Jupiter, flying through a storm on the back of a light brown Pegasus. Raina's dark hair flew in the wind, her purple cloak fluttered, revealing the glimmer of her armour. She was bleeding from cuts on her arms and face. Her Pegasus's eyes were wild, his mouth slavering from hard riding. But Raina peered steadfastly forward into the storm. As Leo watched, a wild griffin dived out of the clouds. It raked its claws across the horse's ribs, almost throwing Raina. She drew her sword and slashed the monster down. Seconds later, 3 Venti appeared, dark air spirits swirling like miniature tornadoes laced with lightning. Raina charged them, yelling defiantly. Then the bronze mirror went dark. No, Leo yelled. No, not now. Show me what happens. He banged on the mirror. Calypso, can you sing again or something? She glared at him. I suppose that is your girlfriend. Your Penelope, your Elizabeth, your Annabeth? What? Leo couldn't figure this out. Half the stuff she said made no sense. That's Raina. She's not my girlfriend. I need to see more. I need... Need. A voice rumbled in the ground beneath his feet. Leo staggered, suddenly feeling like he was standing on the surface of a trampoline. Need is an overused word. A swirling human figure erupted from the sand. Leo's last favourite goddess. The mistress of mud. The princess of potty sludge. Gaia herself. Leo threw a pair of pliers at her. Unfortunately, she wasn't solid and they passed right through. Her eyes were closed, but she didn't look asleep exactly. She had a smile on her dust devil face, as if she was intently listening to her favourite song. Her sandy robe shifted and folded, reminding Leo of the undulating fins on that stupid Shrimpzilla monster they'd fought in the Atlantic. For his money, though, Gaia was uglier. You want to live, Gaia said. You want to join your friends, but you do not need this, my poor boy. It would make no difference. Your friends will die regardless. Leo's legs shook. He hated it. But whenever this witch appeared, he felt like he was 8 years old again, trapped in the lobby of his mum's machine shop, listening to Gaia's soothing evil voice, while his mother was locked inside the burning warehouse, dying from heat and smoke. What I don't need, he growled, is more lies from you, dirtface. You told me my great-granddad died in the 1960s. Wrong. You told me I couldn't save my friends in Rome. Wrong. You told me a lot of things. Gaia's laughter was a soft rustling sound, like gravel trickling down a hill in the first moments of an avalanche. I tried to help you make better choices. You could have saved yourself, but you defied me at every step. You built your ship. You joined that foolish quest. Now you are trapped here, helpless, while the mortal world dies. Leo's hands burst into flame. He wanted to melt Gaia's sandy face to glass. Then he felt Calypso's hand on his shoulder. Gaia. Her voice was stern and steady. You are not welcome. Leo wished he could sound as confident as Calypso. Then he remembered that this annoying 50-year-old girl was actually the immortal daughter of a titan. Ah, Calypso! Gaia raised her arms as if for a hug. Still here, I see, despite the gods' promises. Why do you think that is, my dear grandchild? Are the Olympians being spiteful, leaving you with no company except this undergrown fool? Or have they simply forgotten you because you are not worth their time? Calypso stared straight through the swirling face of Gaia, all the way to the horizon. Yes, Gaia murmured sympathetically, the Olympians are faithless. They do not give second chances. Why do you hold out hope? You supported your father, Atlas, in his great war. You knew that the gods must be destroyed. Why do you hesitate now? I offer you a chance that Zeus would never give you. Where were you these last 3,000 years? Calypso asked. If you are so concerned with my fate, why do you visit me only now? Gaia turned up her palms. The earth is slow to wake. War comes in its own time. But do you think it will pass you by on Aegea? When I remake this world, the prism will be destroyed as well. Aegea? Destroyed? Calypso shook her head, as if she couldn't imagine those two words going together. You do not have to be here when that happens, Gaia promised. Join me now. Kill this boy. Spill his blood upon the earth and help me wake. I will free you and grant you my wish. Any wish. Freedom, revenge against the gods, even a prize. Would you still have the demigod Percy Jackson? I will spare him for you. I will raise him from Tartarus. He will be yours to punish or to love as you choose. Only kill this trespassing boy. Show your loyalty. Several scenarios went through Leo's head, none of them good. He was positive Calypso would strangle him on the spot, or order her invisible wind servants to chop him into a Leo puree. Why wouldn't she? Gaia was making her the ultimate deal. Kill one annoying guy, get a handsome one free. Calypso thrust her hand towards Gaia in a three-fingered gesture Leo recognised from Camp Half-Blood, the ancient Greek ward against evil. This is not just my prison, grandmother. It is my home, and you are the trespasser. The wind ripped Gaia's form into nothingness, scattering the sand into the blue sky. Leo swallowed. Don't take this the wrong way, but you didn't kill me. Are you crazy? Calypso's eyes smouldered with anger, but for once Leo didn't think the anger was aimed at him. Your friends must need you, or else Gaia would not ask for your death. Yeah, I guess. Then we have work to do, she said. We must get you back to your ship. Chapter 52. Leo. Leo thought he'd been busy before. When Calypso set her mind to something, she was a machine. Within a day, she'd gathered enough supplies for a week-long voyage, food, flasks of water, herbal medicines from her garden. She wove a sail bag, enough for a small yacht, and made enough rope for all the rigging. She got so much done that the second day she asked Leo if he needed any help with his own project. He looked up from the circuit board that was slowly coming together. If you didn't know better, I think you were anxious to get rid of me. That's a bonus, she admitted. She was dressed for work in a pair of jeans and a grubby white t-shirt. When he asked her about the wardrobe change, she claimed she had realised how practical these clothes were after making some for Leo. In the blue jeans, she didn't look much like a goddess. Her t-shirt was covered with grass and dirt stains, like she'd just run through a swirling Gaia. Her feet were bare. Her cinnamon toast hair was tied back, which made her almond eyes look even larger and more startling. Her hands were calloused and blistered from working with rope. Looking at her, Leo felt a tugging in his stomach that he couldn't quite explain. So, she prompted. So what? She nodded at the secretary. So can I help? How is it coming on? I'm good here, I guess. If I can wire this thing up to the boat, I should be able to navigate back to the world. Now all you need is a boat. He tried to read her expression. He wasn't sure if she was annoyed that he was still here or wistful that she wasn't leaving too. Then he looked at all the supplies she'd stacked up, easily enough for 2 people for several days. What Gaia said, he hesitated. About your getting off this island. Would you want to try it? She scowled. What do you mean? Well, I'm not saying it would be fun having you along, always complaining and glaring at me and stuff, but I suppose I could stand it if you wanted to try. Her expression softened just a little. How noble, she muttered. But no, Leo, if I tried to come with you, your tiny chance of escape would be no chance at all. The gods have placed ancient magic on this island to keep me here. A hero can leave. I cannot. The most important thing is getting you free, so you can stop Gaia. Not that I care what happens to you, she added quickly, but the world's fate is at stake. Why would you care about that? He asked. I mean, after being away from the world for so long. She arched her eyebrows, as if surprised that he'd asked a sensible question. I suppose I don't like being told what to do, by Gaia or anyone else. As much as I hate the gods sometimes, over the past 3 millennia, I've come to see that they're better than the Titans. They're definitely better than the giants. At least the gods kept in touch. Hermes has always been kind to me, and your father, Hephaestus, has often visited. He is a good person. Leo wasn't sure what to make of her faraway tone. She almost sounded like she was pondering his worth, not his dad's. She reached out and closed his mouth. He hadn't realised it was hanging open. Now, Calypso said, how can I help? Oh, he stared down at his project. But when he spoke, he blurted out an idea that had been forming ever since Calypso had made his new clothes. You know that flame-proof cloth? You think you could make me a little bag of that fabric? He described the dimensions. Calypso waved her hand impatiently. That will take only a few minutes. Will it help on your quest? Yeah, it might save my life. And, could you chip off a little piece of crystal from your cave? I don't need much. She frowned. That's an odd request. Humour me. All right, consider it done. I'll make the fireproof pouch tonight at the loom, when I've cleaned up. But what can I do now while my hands are dirty? She held up her calloused, grimy fingers. Leo couldn't help thinking there was nothing better than a girl who didn't mind getting her hands dirty. But of course that was just a general comment. Didn't apply to Calypso, obviously. Well, he said, you could twist some more bronze coils, but that's kind of specialised. She pushed in next to him on the bench and began to work, her hands braiding the bronze wiring faster than he could have. Just like weaving, she said. This isn't so hard. Huh, Leo said. Well, if you ever get off this island and want a job, let me know. You're not a total klutz. She smirked. A job, eh? Making things in your forge? Nah, we could start our own shop, Leo said, surprising himself. Starting a machine shop had always been one of his dreams, but he'd never told anyone about it. Leo and Calypso's garage, auto repair and mechanical monsters. Fresh fruits and vegetables, Calypso offered. Lemonade and stew, Leo added. We could even provide entertainment. You could sing and I could, randomly burst into flames. Calypso laughed, a clear, happy sound that made Leo's heart go kabump. See, he said, I'm funny. She managed to kill her smile. You are not funny. Now, get back to work or no lemonade and stew. Yes, ma'am, he said. They worked in silence, side by side, for the rest of the afternoon. 2 nights later, the guidance console was finished. Leo and Calypso sat on the beach, near the spot where Leo had destroyed the dining table, and they ate a picnic dinner together. The full moon turned the waves to silver. Their campfire sent orange sparks into the sky. Calypso wore a fresh white shirt and her jeans, which she'd apparently decided to live in. Behind them in the dunes, the supplies were carefully packed and ready to go. All we need now is a boat, Calypso said. Leo nodded. He tried not to linger on the word we. Calypso had made it clear she wasn't going. I can start chopping wood into boards tomorrow, Leo said. Few days, we'll have enough for a small hull. You've made a ship before, Calypso remembered. Your Argo 2. Leo nodded. He thought about all those months he'd spent creating the Argo 2. Somehow, making a boat to sail from Aegea seemed like a more daunting task. So, how long until you sail? Calypso's tone was light, but she didn't meet his eyes. Not sure. Another week? For some reason, saying that made Leo feel less agitated. When he had got here, he couldn't wait to leave. Now he was glad he had a few more days. Weird. Calypso ran her fingers across the completed circuit board. This took so long to make. You can't rush perfection. A smile tugged at the edge of her mouth. Yes, but will it work? Getting out, no problem, Leo said. But to get back, I'll need Festus and... What? Leo blinked. Festus, my bronze dragon. Once I've figured out how to rebuild him, I'll... You told me about Festus, Calypso said. But what do you mean, get back? Leo grinned nervously. Well, to get back here, duh. I'm sure I said that. You most definitely did not. I'm not going to leave you here. After you helped me and everything, of course I'm coming back. Once I rebuild Festus, he'll be able to handle an improved guidance system. There's this astrolabe that He stopped, deciding it was best not to mention that it had been built by one of Calypso's old flames. That I found in Bologna. Anyway, I think with that crystal you gave me... You can't come back, Calypso insisted. Leo's heart went clunk. Because I'm not welcome? Because you can't. It's impossible. No man finds Aegea twice. That is the rule. Leo rolled his eyes. Yeah, well, you might have noticed I'm not good at following rules. I'm coming back here with my dragon, and we'll spring you. Take you wherever you want to go. It's only fair. Fair. Calypso's voice was barely audible. In the firelight, her eyes looked so sad. Leo couldn't stand it. Did she think he was lying to her, just to make her feel better? He considered it a given that he would come back and free her from this island. How could he not? You didn't really think I could start Leo and Calypso's auto-repair without Calypso, did you? He asked. I can't make lemonade and stew, and I sure can't sing. She stared at the sand. Well, anyway, Leo said, tomorrow I'll start on the lumber, and in a few days. He looked over at the water. Something was bobbing on the waves. Leo watched in disbelief as a large wooden raft floated in on the tide and slid to a stop on the beach. Leo was too dazed to move, but Calypso sprang to her feet. Hurry! She sprinted across the beach, grabbing some supply bags and ran them to the raft. I don't know how long it will stay. But... Leo stood. His legs felt like they'd turned to rock. He had just convinced himself he had another week on Aegea. Now he didn't have time to finish dinner. That's the magic raft? Duh! Calypso yelled. "It might work like it's supposed to, and take you where you want to go, but we can't be sure. The island's magic is obviously unstable. You must rig up your guidance device to navigate." She snatched up the console and ran towards the raft, which got Leo moving. He helped her fasten it to the raft and run wires to the small rudder in the back. The raft was already fitted with a mast, so Leo and Calypso hauled their sail aboard and started on the rigging. They worked side by side in perfect harmony. Even among the Hephaestus campers, Leo had never worked with anyone as intuitive as this immortal gardener girl. In no time, they had the sail in place and all the supplies aboard. Leo hit the buttons on the Archimedes sphere, muttered a prayer to his dad, Hephaestus, and the celestial bronze console hummed to life. The rigging tightened, the sail turned, the raft began scraping against the sand, straining to reach the waves. "Go," Calypso said. Leo turned. She was so close he couldn't stand it. She smelled like cinnamon and wood smoke, and he thought he'd never smell anything that good again. "The raft finally got here," he said. Calypso snorted. Her eyes might have been red, but it was hard to tell in the moonlight. "You just noticed?" "But if it only shows up for guys you like." "Don't push your luck, Leo Valdez," she said. "I still hate you." "Okay, and you are not coming back here," she insisted, "so don't give me any empty promises." "How about a full promise?" he said. "Because I'm definitely..." She grabbed his face and pulled him into a kiss, which effectively shut him up. For all his joking and flirting, Leo had never kissed a girl before. Well, sisterly pecks on the cheek from Piper, but that didn't count. This was a real, full-contact kiss. If Leo had had gears and wires in his brain, they would have short-circuited. Calypso pushed him away. "That didn't happen." "Okay." His voice sounded an octave higher than usual. "Get out of here." "Okay." She turned, wiping her eyes furiously, and stormed up the beach, the breeze tussling her hair. Leo wanted to call to her, but the sail caught the full force of the wind, and the raft cleared the beach. He struggled to align the guidance console. By the time Leo looked back, the island of Aegea was a dark line in the distance, their campfire pulsing like a tiny orange heart. His lips still tangled from the kiss. "That didn't happen," he told himself. "I can't be in love with an immortal girl. She definitely can't be in love with me. Not possible." As his raft skimmed over the water, taking him back to the mortal world, he understood a line from the prophecy better, an oath to keep with a final breath. He understood how dangerous oaths could be, but Leo didn't care. "I'm coming back for you, Calypso," he said to the night wind. "I swear it, on the river Styx." Chapter 53. Annabeth. Annabeth had never been scared of the dark, but normally the dark wasn't 40 feet tall. It didn't have black wings, a whip made out of stars, and a shadowy chariot pulled by vampire horses. Nyx was almost too much to take in. Looming over the chasm, she was a churning figure of ash and smoke, as big as the Athena Parthenos statue, but very much alive. Her dress was void black, mixed with the colours of a space nebula, as if galaxies were being born in her bodice. Her face was hard to see except for the pinpoints of her eyes, which shone like quasars. When her wings beat, waves of darkness rolled over the cliffs, making Annabeth feel heavy and sleepy, her eyesight dim. The goddess's chariot was made of the same material as Nico D'Angelo's sword, Stygian iron, pulled by two massive horses, all black except for their pointed silver fangs. The beast's legs floated in the abyss, turning from solid to smoke as they moved. The horses snarled and bared their fangs at Annabeth. The goddess lashed her whip, a thin streak of stars like diamond barbs, and the horses reared back. "No shade," the goddess said. "Down, shadow. These little prizes are not for you." Percy eyed the horses as they nickered. He was still shrouded in death mist, so he looked like an out-of-focus corpse, which broke Annabeth's heart every time she saw him. It also must not have been very good camouflage, since Nyx could obviously see them. Annabeth couldn't read the expression on Percy's ghoulish face very well. Apparently he didn't like whatever the horses were saying. So you won't let them eat us?" he asked the goddess. "They really want to eat us." Nyx's quasar eyes burned. "Of course not. I would not let my horses eat you, any more than I would let Aklis kill you. Such fine prizes. I will kill myself." Annabeth didn't feel particularly witty or courageous, but her instincts told her to take the initiative, or this would be a very short conversation. "Oh, don't kill yourself," she cried. "We're not that scary." The goddess lowered her whip. "What? No, I didn't mean..." "Well, I hope not." Annabeth looked at Percy and forced a laugh. "We wouldn't want to scare you, would we?" "Ha ha ha," Percy said weakly. No, we wouldn't." The vampire horses looked confused. They reared and snorted and knocked their dark heads together. Nyx pulled back on the reins. "Do you know who I am?" she demanded. "Well, you're Night, I suppose," said Annabeth. "I mean, I can tell because you're dark and everything, though the brochure didn't say much about you." Nyx's eyes winked out for a moment. "What brochure?" Annabeth patted her pockets. "We had one, didn't we?" Percy licked his lips. "Uh-huh." He was still watching the horses, his hand tight on his sword hilt, but he was smart enough to follow Annabeth's lead. Now, she just had to hope she wasn't making things worse. Though, honestly, she didn't see how things could be worse. "Anyway," she said, "I guess the brochure didn't say much because you weren't spotlighted on the tour. We got to see the River Phlegathon, the Cocytus, the Arai, the Poison Glade of Aklis, even some random titans and giants, but Nyx, no, you weren't really featured." "Featured? Spotlighted?" "Yeah," Percy said, warming up to the idea. "We came down here for the Tartarus tour, like exotic destinations, you know. The underworld is overdone. Mount Olympus is a tourist trap." "Gods, totally," Annabeth agreed. "So we booked the Tartarus excursion, but no one ever mentioned we'd run into Nyx. Huh, oh well, guess they didn't think you were important." "Not important." Nyx cracked her whip. Her horses bucked and snapped their silvery fangs. Waves of darkness rolled out of the chasm, turning Annabeth's insides to jelly, but she couldn't show her fear. She pushed down Percy's sword arm, forcing him to lower his weapon. This was a goddess beyond anything they had ever faced. Nyx was older than any Olympian or Titan or giant, older even than Gaia. She couldn't be defeated by two demigods, at least not two demigods using force. Annabeth made herself look at the goddess's massive dark face. "Well, how many other demigods have come to see you on the tour?" she asked innocently. Nyx's hand went slack on the reins. "None. Not one. This is unacceptable." Annabeth shrugged. "Maybe it's because you haven't really done anything to get in the news. I mean, I can understand Tartarus being important. This whole place is named after him. Or if we could meet Day." "Oh yeah," Percy chimed in. "Day? She would be impressive. I'd totally want to meet her. Maybe get her autograph." "Day!" Nyx gripped the rail of her black chariot. The whole vehicle shuddered. "You mean Hamira? She is my daughter. Night is much more powerful than Day." "Hey," said Annabeth, "I like the Array, or even Aklis better. They are my children as well." Percy stifled a yawn. "Oh, I've got a lot of children, huh?" "I am the mother of all terrors," Nyx cried. "The fates themselves, Hecate, old age, pain, sleep, death, and all of the curses. Behold how newsworthy I am." Chapter 54. Annabeth. Nyx lashed her whip again. The darkness congealed around her. On either side, an army of shadows appeared, more dark-winged array, which Annabeth was not thrilled to see. A withered crone who must have been Jaras, the goddess of old age, and a younger woman in a black toga, her eyes gleaming and her smile like a serial killer's, no doubt Iris, the goddess of strife. More kept appearing, dozens of demons and minor gods, each one the spawn of night. Annabeth wanted to run. She was facing a brood of horrors that could snap anyone's sanity, but if she ran, she would die. Next to her, Percy's breathing turned shallow. Even though his misty ghoul disguise, Annabeth could tell he was on the verge of panic. She had to stand her ground for both of them. "I am a daughter of Athena," she thought. "I control my own mind." She imagined a mental frame around what she was seeing. She told herself it was just a movie, a scary movie, sure, but it could not hurt her. She was in control. "Yeah, not bad," she admitted. "I guess we could get one picture for the scrapbook, but I don't know. You guys are so dark. Even if I used a flash, I'm not sure it would come out." "Yeah," Percy managed. "You guys aren't photogenic." "You miserable tourists," Nyx hissed. "How dare you not tremble before me? How dare you not whimper and beg for my autograph and a picture for your scrapbook? You want newsworthy. My son Hypnos once put Zeus to sleep. When Zeus pursued him across the earth, bent on vengeance, Hypnos hid in my palace for safety, and Zeus did not follow. Even the king of Olympus fears me." "Uh-huh." Annabeth turned to Percy. "Well, it's getting late. We should probably get lunch at one of those restaurants the tour guide recommended. Then we can find the doors of death." "Aha!" Nyx cried in triumph. Her brood of shadows stirred and echoed. "Aha! Aha!" "You wish to see the doors of death?" Nyx asked. "They lie at the very heart of Tartarus. Mortals such as you could never reach them, except through the halls of my palace, the Mansion of Night." She gestured behind her. Floating in the abyss, maybe 300 feet below, was a doorway of black marble, leading into some sort of large room. Annabeth's heart pounded so strongly she felt it in her toes. That was the way forward. But it was so far down, an impossible jump. If they missed, they would fall into chaos and be scattered into nothingness, a final death with no do-over. Even if they could make the jump, the goddess of night and her most fearsome children stood in their way. With a jolt, Annabeth realised what needed to happen. Like everything she'd ever done, it was a long shot. In a way that calmed her down, a crazy idea in the face of death. Okay, her body seemed to say, relaxing. This is familiar territory. She managed a bored sigh. I suppose we could do one picture, but a group shot won't work. Nix, how about one of you with your favourite child? Which one is that? The brood rustled. Dozens of horrible glowing eyes turned towards Nix. The goddess shifted uncomfortably, as if her chariot were heating up under her feet. Her shadow horses huffed and pawed at the void. My favourite child? She asked. All my children are terrifying. Percy snorted. Seriously? I've met the Fates. I've met Thanatos. They weren't so scary. You got to have somebody in this crowd who's worse than that. The darkest, Annabeth said. The most like you. I am the darkest, hissed Iris. Wars and strife. I have caused all manner of death. I am darker still, snarled Geras. I dim the eyes and addle the brain. Every mortal fears old age. Yeah, Annabeth said, trying to ignore her chattering teeth. I'm not seeing enough dark. I mean, you're the children of night. Show me dark. The horde of array wailed, flapping their leathery wings and stirring up clouds of blackness. Geras spread her withered hands and dimmed the entire abyss. Iris breathed a shadowy spray of buckshot across the void. I am the darkest, hissed one of the demons. No, No, behold my darkness. If 1,000 giant octopuses had squirted ink at the same time at the bottom of the deepest, most sunless ocean trench, it could not have been blacker. Annabeth might as well have been blind. She gripped Percy's hand and steeled her nerves. Wait, Nix called, suddenly panicked. I can't see anything. Yes, shouted one of her children proudly. I did that. No, I did. Fool, it was me. Dozens of voices argued in the darkness. The horses whinnied in alarm. Stop it, Nix yelled. Whose foot is that? Iris is hitting me, cried someone. Mother, tell her to stop hitting me. I did not, yelled Iris. Ouch! The sounds of scuffling got louder. If possible, the darkness became even deeper. Annabeth's eyes dilated so much they felt like they were being pulled out of their sockets. She squeezed Percy's hand. Ready? For what? After a pause, he grunted unhappily. Poseidon's underpants. You can't be serious. Somebody... Give me light, Nix screamed. I can't believe I just said that. It's a trick, Iris yelled. The demigods are escaping. I've got them, screamed an array. No, that's my neck, Geras gagged. Jump, Annabeth told Percy. They leapt into the darkness, aiming for the doorway far, far below. Chapter 55. Annabeth. After their fall into Tartarus, jumping 300 feet into the Mansion of Night should have felt quick. Instead, Annabeth's heart seemed to slow down. Between the beats, she had ample time to write her own obituary. Annabeth Chase, died aged 17. Ba-boom! Assuming her birthday, July 12th, had passed while she was in Tartarus, but honestly she had no idea. Ba-boom! Died of massive injuries while leaping like an idiot into the abyss of chaos and splattering on the entry hall floor of Nix's mansion. Ba-boom! Survived by her father, stepmother, and 2 stepbrothers who barely knew her. Ba-boom! In lieu of flowers, please send donations to Camp Half-Blood, assuming Gaia hasn't already destroyed it. Her feet hit solid floor. Pain shot up her legs, but she stumbled forward and broke into a run, hauling Percy after her. Above them in the dark, Nix and her children scuffled and yelled. I've got them! My foot! Stop it! Annabeth kept running. She couldn't see anyway, so she closed her eyes. She used her other senses, listening for the echo of open spaces, feeling for cross breezes against her face, sniffing for any scent of danger, smoke or poison or the stench of demons. It wasn't the first time she'd plunged through darkness. She imagined she was back in the tunnels under Rome, searching out the Athena Parthenos. In retrospect, her journey to Arachne's cavern seemed like a trip to Disneyland. The squabbling sounds of Nix's children got further away. That was good. Percy was still running at her side, holding her hand. Also good. In the distance ahead of them, Annabeth began to hear a throbbing sound, like her own heartbeat echoing back. Amplified so powerfully, the floor vibrated underfoot. The sound filled her with dread, so she figured it must be the right way to go. She ran towards it. As the beat got louder, she smelled smoke and heard the flickering of torches on either side. She guessed there would be light, but a crawling sensation across her neck warned her it would be a mistake to open her eyes. "Don't look," she told Percy. "Wasn't planning on it," he said. "You can feel that, right? We're still in the Mansion of Night. I do not want to see it." Smart boy, Annabeth thought. She used to tease Percy for being dumb, but in truth his instincts were usually right on target. Whatever horrors lay in the Mansion of Night, they weren't meant for mortal eyes. Seeing them would be worse than staring at the face of Medusa. Better to run in darkness. The throbbing got louder still, sending vibrations straight up Annabeth's spine. It felt like someone was knocking on the bottom of the world, demanding to be let in. She sensed the walls opening up on either side of them. The air smelled fresher, or at least not quite as sulphurous. There was another sound too, closer than the deep pulsing, the sound of flowing water. Annabeth's heart raced. She knew the exit was close. If they could make it out of the Mansion of Night, maybe they could leave the dark brood of demons behind. She began to run faster, which would have led to her death if Percy hadn't stopped her. Chapter 56. Annabeth. "Annabeth!" Percy pulled her back, just as her foot hit the edge of a drop. She almost pitched forward, into who knew what, but Percy grabbed her and wrapped her in his arms. "It's okay," he promised. She pressed her face into his shirt and kept her eyes closed tight. She was trembling, but not just from fear. Percy's embrace was so warm and comforting. She wanted to stay there forever, safe and protected. But that wasn't reality. She couldn't afford to relax. She couldn't lean on Percy any more than she had to. He needed her too. "Thanks." She gently disentangled herself from his arms. "Can you tell what's in front of us?" "Water," he said. "I'm still not looking. I don't think it's safe yet." "Agreed." "I can sense a river, or maybe it's a moat. It's blocking our path, flowing left to right through a channel cut in the rock. The opposite side is about 20 feet away." Annabeth mentally scolded herself. She'd heard the flowing water, but she had never considered she might be running headlong into it. "Is there a bridge, or—" "I don't think so," Percy said. "And there's something wrong with the water. Listen." Annabeth concentrated. Within the roaring current, thousands of voices cried out, shrieking in agony, pleading for mercy. "Help!" they groaned. "It was an accident! The pain!" their voices wailed. "Make it stop!" Annabeth didn't need her eyes to imagine the river. A black, briny current, filled with tortured souls, being swept deeper and deeper into Tartarus. "The river Acheron," she guessed. "The fifth river of the underworld." "I like the Phlegethon better than this," Percy muttered. "It's the river of pain, the ultimate punishment for the souls of the damned, murderers especially." "Murderers," the river wailed. "Yes, like you." "Join us," another voice whispered. "You are no better than we are." Annabeth's head was flooded with images of all the monsters she'd killed over the years. "That wasn't murder," she protested. "I was defending myself." The river changed course through her mind, showing her Zoe Nightshade, who had been slain on Mount Tamalpais because she'd come to rescue Annabeth from the Titans. She saw Nico's sister, Bianca D'Angelo, dying in the collapse of the metal giant Talos because she also had tried to save Annabeth. Michael Yu and Selena Beauregard, who had died in the Battle of Manhattan. "You could have prevented it," the river told Annabeth. "You should have seen a better way." Most painful of all, Luke Castellan. Annabeth remembered Luke's blood on her dagger after he'd sacrificed himself to stop Kronos from destroying Olympus. "His blood is on your hands," the river wailed. "There should have been another way." Annabeth had wrestled with the same thought many times. She tried to convince herself Luke's death wasn't her fault. Luke had chosen his fate. Still, she didn't know if his soul had found peace in the underworld, or if he'd been reborn, or if he'd been washed into Tartarus because of his crimes. He might be one of the tortured voices flowing past right now. "You murdered him," the river cried. "Jump in and share his punishment." Percy gripped her arm. "Don't listen." "But I know." His voice sounded as brittle as ice. "They're telling me the same stuff, I think. I think this moat must be in the border of Night's territory. If we get across, we should be okay. We'll have to jump." "You said it was 20 feet. "Yeah, you'll have to trust me. Put your arms around my neck and hang on." "How can you possibly—" "There!" cried a voice behind them. "Kill the ungrateful tourists." The children of Nyx had found them. Annabeth wrapped her arms around Percy's neck. "Go." With her eyes closed, she could only guess how he managed it. Maybe he used the force of the river somehow. Maybe he was just scared out of his mind and charged with adrenaline. Percy leapt with more strength than she would have thought possible. They sailed through the air as the river churned and wailed below them, splashing Annabeth's bare ankles with stinging brine. Then, clump. They were on solid ground again. "You can open your eyes," Percy said, breathing hard, "but you won't like what you see." Annabeth blinked. After the darkness of Nyx, even the dim red glow of Tartarus seemed blinding. Before them stretched a valley big enough to hold the San Francisco Bay. The booming noise came from the entire landscape, as if thunder were echoing from beneath the ground. Under poisonous clouds, the rolling terrain glistened purple with dark red and blue scar lines. "It looks like..." Annabeth fought down her revulsion. "Like a giant heart." "The heart of Tartarus," Percy murmured. The centre of the valley was covered with a fine black fuzz of peppery dots. They were so far away, it took Annabeth a moment to realise she was looking at an army. Thousands, maybe tens of thousands of monsters gathered around a central pinpoint of darkness. It was too far to see any details, but Annabeth had no doubt what the pinpoint was. Even from the edge of the valley, Annabeth could feel its power tugging at her soul. The doors of death. Yeah, Percy's voice was hoarse. He still had the pale, wasted complexion of a corpse, which meant he looked about as good as Annabeth felt. She realised she'd forgotten all about their pursuers. What happened to Nyx? She turned. Somehow they'd landed several hundred yards from the banks of Acheron, which flowed through a channel cut into a black volcanic hill. Beyond that was nothing but darkness. No sign of anyone coming after them. Apparently even the minions of night didn't like to cross the Acheron. She was about to ask Percy how he had jumped so far when she heard the skittering of a rock slide in the hills to their left. She drew her Dracon bone sword. Percy raised Riptide. A patch of glowing white hair appeared over the ridge, then a familiar grinning face with pure silver eyes. "Bob?" Annabeth was so happy she actually jumped. "Oh my gods!" "Friends!" The Titan lumbered towards them. The bristles of his broom had been burned off. His janitor's uniform was slashed with new claw marks, but he looked delighted. On his shoulder, small Bob the kitten purred almost as loudly as the pulsing heart of Tartarus. "I found you!" Bob gathered them both in a rib-crushing hug. "You look like smoking dead people. That's good." "Oh," Percy said. "How did you get here? Through the Mansion of Night?" No. Bob shook his head adamantly. "That place is too scary. Another way, only good for titans and such." "Let me guess," Annabeth said. "You went sideways." Bob scratched his chin, evidently at a loss for words. No, more diagonal." Annabeth laughed. Here they were at the heart of Tartarus, facing an impossible army. She would take any comfort she could get. She was ridiculously glad to have Bob the Titan with them again. She kissed his immortal nose, which made him blink. "We stay together now?" he asked. "Yes," Annabeth agreed. "Time to see if this death mist works." "And if it doesn't?" Percy stopped himself. There was no point in wondering about that. They were about to march into the middle of an enemy army. If they were spotted, they were dead. Despite that, Annabeth managed to smile. Their goal was in sight. They had a Titan with a broom and a very loud kitten on their side. That had to count for something. "Doors of death," she said. "Here we come."